Episode 1 of The Diplomat Season 2 begins with the horrifying sound of fire roaring. EMTs are at the scene, as Ronnie is alive, but not in a good way. Unfortunately, 2 others have also been injured and 1 is dead. Austin and Kate scramble to get answers, as it appears the car was rigged with an IED. We know that Ronnie is alive, at least for now, and Kate then receives a note confirming that Grove is dead. This means Hal and Stuart are still alive, based on the intel she's received. Hal is in a rough way though, given he's in surgery, and it's unknown right now what state he'll be in after. Austin speaks to Kate and explains that the Tory party have been receiving donations from Russian sources. The key here may well be Merrick Grove, especially if these connections go back to Lenkov. Her theory is that Lenkov put together the attack, but the Prime Minister hired him, not the Kremlin. Kate is rattled, believing that the British are not to be trusted. She's convinced that the calls are coming from inside the house and tells Idra Park, the CIA chief, of her concerns. The fact that the Americans were the ones hurt the most from this bomb certainly backs up her theory. Through all of this, the French intelligence believe that the British are going to kill Roman Lenkov. Kate is paranoid and eventually tasks Idra with investigating Prime Minister Nigel Trowbridge. Unfortunately, that's easier said than done, but the pair use a whiteboard to disguise their chatter for fear of the room being bugged. As for the Prime Minister himself, he gathers intel on the situation, believing that the bombing in Notting Hill is an isolated incident and not linked to the bigger picture. He's undermined by his wife, who's clearly the dominant one here, and encourages him to call a Cobra meeting. Trowbridge does just that. Kate heads to the hospital where Hal is in a rough way, but he survives another close call. Alone though, Kate finds herself conflicted. This is a man she spent years with building a life, and despite everything falling apart and all the issues they've had, when he wakes up and Kate sees his cuts, she breaks down. It's a small moment of vulnerability for her and helps to build Kate's character until we get back to the situation at hand. The Cobra meeting goes ahead and Trowbridge is convinced that the Russians are responsible. However, new evidence comes to light that a car bomb was made in Britain. Furthermore, nobody seems to be able to get through to Roylin either. The Prime Minister is desperate to find her, throwing doubts over Kate's initial thinking that he's behind the attacks. However, she isn't entirely convinced that he's not either. Things are getting tense and both Kate and Idra can sense as much here. Idra turns her attention to Hal and interrogates him in hospital. After getting the lowdown on what he remembers and how he's pointing fingers at the Foreign Secretary, we also learn that Stuart's surgery has gone well. He remembers everything, although he thinks the explosion was a car crash, so he has distorted memories here. Unfortunately, Ronnie doesn't make it. Despite seeing her earlier in the episode, she passes away, and unfortunately this only raises the tensions between the US and the UK. Kate rings the US Secretary of State, Miguel Gannon, to break the news. The pair manage to solve some of their ill will toward one another in the face of this tragedy, but Kate feels the guilt and makes a difficult call to tell her family the bad news. A call comes in for Kate though, from someone called Anne LeGrand Armstrong, but she's apparently been dead for 15 years. It turns out the person on the other end of the line is none other than Roylin. Alas, the plot thickens as episode 1 comes to an end. Episode 2 of The Diplomat Season 2 begins with Ronnie's funeral. It's a solemn affair and Hal is at least on his feet and able to attend. As for Idra, she meets with Roylin in confidence and decides that she should show her face, politically manoeuvring and even handing over a different coat too. Roylin is not sure this is a good idea, but right now the ceremony is the safest place to be. Of course, people start to notice her there, including Trowbridge himself. He messes up his eulogy as a result and then hurriedly walks towards Roylin during one of the hymns. Roylin switches coats just as Hal drops his cane, and with the Prime Minister busy and his eye off the ball, Roylin changes her coat and manages to get away without anyone seeing. They scramble down to the garage where Roylin lies down on the back seat with a blanket over her, and Idra drives away. After the plan, Hal tells Kate that she can leave and be with Austin Dennison if she wants. Kate shrugs it off for now, and when he leaves, Austin approaches. Apparently there's a secret plan to kill Lenkov orchestrated by the British government, but Kate is adamant they need Lenkov alive to see if the British really have been pulling the strings here. Kate also does her best surprise Pikachu face, and she feigns shock at Roylin being spotted at the funeral. However, there's clearly still something between the pair. Stuart Hayford also returns to action after his stint in the hospital. Kate isn't particularly happy to see him back so soon, but he believes he needs to be active rather than mulling over Ronnie's death. However, seeing Ronnie's empty desk could be a constant reminder for him and trigger panic attacks he's been suffering with since the hospital. We'll have to wait and see on that front if that happens. So where is Roylin for all of this? Well, she's inside the US Embassy and asked to see Austin Dennison. Kate makes a call and he agrees to see her under the pretense of signing Ronnie's condolence book. Austin is not happy about being duped when he shows, obviously, but in the room with Roylin, Idra and Kate, Roylin reveals that Lenkov was hired by the British to launch the missile at the HMS Courageous warship. One of the men seemingly in on this was Grove, who has extremist views about immigration and other political hot topics. He planned to meet with Howe and was silenced for it. It seems someone close to the Prime Minister has been bugging the phones, and Roylin explains that she always uses a disposable phone when she talks to the Prime Minister. She can't control the calls coming into her phone though, and that, unfortunately, pins the details on Kate, given she phoned and revealed the Notting Hill meeting to her. Her call is the reason the bomb went off in the first place. After the meeting, Austin believes Roylin is protecting the Prime Minister and wants to turn her into the authorities. Kate warns against this though, given the police could be in on this. The only solution here is to keep her in a safe house for another day. There's still a lot of hostility between Trowbridge and Dennison though, but the former is a man possessed, determined to find Margaret Roylin. He speaks to Kate and knows she called Roylin while she was in Paris. Kate claims she did so as she wanted to know how he would react if the French didn't agree to the Lenkov arrest. Roylin told her Trowbridge would be happy that Austin Dennison failed, and that is, of course, not actually that far from the truth. After this meeting, Ronnie's body is transported back to the US. This serves as background fodder for more political scheming and mistrust, this time coming from the Americans. Stuart and Hal don't trust one another, and the former even goes off on one with Idra, pointing out that Ronnie may still be alive if the previous ambassadors were still in place. He also lashes out at Kate here too, especially when he learns about the call and places the blame squarely on her shoulders. Kate brings this baggage back home when she speaks to Hal. She points out how worried she is about losing her humanity, but Hal shrugs it off, believing she'll grow into the role. Hal and Kate are very different, and in the end the pair wind up sleeping in separate rooms following several skirmishing disagreements. As the episode closes out though, Hal realises he can't actually get into bed himself. He needs Kate's help, and as she bows before him to help with his shoes, is a very symbolic moment of how she's still subservient to him, but for how long. Episode 3 of The Diplomat Season 2 doesn't waste any time, picking up with a press release from Trowbridge, announcing to the world that Roman Lenkov has been killed by special forces. They broke into his mansion and killed him. Kate and Idra discuss this with Stuart, as it seems Roylin's warnings have come to light. Kate agrees with Stuart's assessment of turning Roylin over to the authorities, but Idra doesn't think it's a good idea. She knows Roylin is hiding something and is going to bring this to the CIA director. She's also pretty confident that the director is going to agree with her that they need to learn more. Austin Dennison calls for Kate not long after, who's worried that she's going to be sent home. Outside, Hal shows up with Brad Chapman, a man paying for the party and a donor from the US Embassy. Kate is heading to the Foreign Office when Hal broaches the idea of bringing Brad along. Kate weasels out of this and meets with Austin alone. She immediately apologises, but Austin waves it away. It turns out there's a written letter of no confidence towards the Prime Minister, so right now, Nickel is on the way out. If he doesn't step down willingly, Austin and the others are going to force him out. Austin is not happy with the execution of Lenkov, and nobody here in the government seems to believe it was an accident. Austin may potentially be in the running for being the new Prime Minister if Nickel is booted, and Kate is stoked when she finds out. He shuts down her enthusiasm and remains fixed on the plan at hand. Specifically, it'll be at the Independence Day party, where he'll take Nickel aside at the greenhouse and tell him to his face. Austin believes he'll be less likely to kick up a fuss that way. Kate feeds the news over to Stuart and the pair have a celebratory hug. The reasoning for Trowbridge's resignation is where the pair come unstuck, and when Stuart learns about the greenhouse coup, he's a little uneasy. He thinks this should all be done officially in a formal government building rather than prancing about in greenhouses. Kate continues her victory parade, speaking to Cal in confidence next. Kate also reveals that Dennison could well be the next PM and gushes over him being one of the only true, loyal, decent men in politics. And it's pretty funny that she does this while she's standing right next to Hal. Hal then brings up the potential of Brad's donations and how this could be a way of fast-tracking Kate into the White House. This party is costing him $300k, which isn't a great look in the middle of a financial crisis across Britain. It's also being sponsored by Sunfied too, which shocks Kate. We then cut forward to the big day. American flags are put up, there's a lot of red, white and blue, and fireworks are planned for the evening. Stuart is floated the idea that this could be used to disguise explosions, and you can see that he's starting to get cold feet. Stuart also gets a green light from Billy later on to allow Kate to be the one to reveal the truth to Trowbridge. Billy is okay with it, seeing it as a win for Kate, and it's not an answer he was expecting. Stuart is not happy, insinuating that Kate has her eye off the ball and is focusing more on Austin Dennison for personal reasons. He backtracks a little when Billy perks up, but it's enough to sow the seeds of doubt on Kate's credentials in a position of power. As for Kate, she speaks to Idra, who wants to put a team out on the greenhouse. Given nearly 3,000 people are going to attend this party, the potential of drunk punters heading to the greenhouse and having sex is pretty high, and it's not a great place for a coup if that was to occur. Idra has got nothing from Royland though, and Kate warns that she shouldn't be keeping her against her will. As for Stuart, he's decided he's not going to be at the party, at least not further on in the evening, so he's handing over his duty to others given he doesn't really want to be near fireworks that could trigger his PTSD, which is fair enough to be honest. Kate worries that Hal could face the same thing and offers up a safe house as a refuge away from all of this. Hal refuses though, claiming he's gone through this before and he's not concerned. That afternoon, there's trouble brewing politically. Several British MPs have declined their invitation to the party. One has even had their house egged for going up against the Prime Minister in Parliament, while the general consensus across Britain is that people actually support Trowbridge's decision to kill Lenkov. There are even memes and hashtags floating around too. Nicol shows up at the party and even reveals he has a big meeting with the Scottish First Minister too. He invites Kate along and Austin overhears this. He's shocked and sees everything dissolve in his hands. Instead, he's going to play dirty and decide to bring up that Nicol ordered a strike on his own aircraft carrier. It'll end Austin's career but also do the same for Nicol too, and it's a price he's willing to take. Unfortunately, he bails on the initial plan. With everything hanging in the balance, that night Stuart decides to leave just as the fireworks go off. As they explode overhead, Kate gives her big speech about the forging of US and UK bound by fire. Unfortunately, Hal ends up having a panic attack as the fireworks rage. She manages to calm him down as the episode comes to an end. Episode 4 of The Diplomat Season 2 starts with Stuart arriving at the office, jubilant over the embassy's successful 4th of July party. However, the girl he took home, Georgia, the woman with car troubles, is actually with the CIA chief, Idra. Uh-oh. It turns out Billy asked Idra to investigate Stuart because he wasn't acting himself and had Georgia record their entire night together. In fact, the pair also ended up having sex too, which kind of explains Stuart's jubilant behaviour earlier on in the episode. Unfortunately, under the supposed privacy between them, he slated his boss and also badmouthed the US as a whole. The reason for spying on Stuart stems from the fact that they were worried he'd been recruited by Russia. Kate arrives to see Trowbridge and breaks the news that Austin is going to resign and will go to the press with accusations surrounding the ship attack. Royland though remains steadfast that the Prime Minister isn't to blame. However, Kate suggests bringing Hal in to talk to her. Idra is vehemently against this, but Kate believes it's the right call and is all in on making this a reality. Royland and Hal are moved to a secure location where they talk. We don't hear the contents of their discussion, but it's enough for Hal to become spooked and decide they can't give Royland to the police. It's not the Prime Minister involved, but he does know that the officials who are behind this are very high up. Kate and Idra believe Hal is being fed lies until they head back and hear it from him directly. It turns out Royland was the one who ordered the attack on the HMS Courageous and blamed Grove for it. Apparently it's all about saving the kingdom, and with Scotland looking to leave, they needed a unifying event. She hired Lenkov herself to attack the British ship and nudge that diplomacy forward. Lenkov though was supposed to use limpet mines, which attach to the ship and float away when explode, but they weren't available, so instead anti-ship missiles were used. What they were unaware of at the time was that the crew emptied a fuel storage area to put spare tanks in, and that's where the missile hit. There wasn't supposed to be any deaths, but 40 people were on board and were obviously blown to pieces. The Prime Minister has no knowledge of this, and the only ones in on it are Grove, Royland, obviously, and an MP named Lenny Stendig. Stendig was the one who bombed Grove's car, worried he would confess. Kay, Idra and Hal are reeling after this bombshell reveal and decide to take action. The initial plan to kick the Prime Minister out is on hiatus, and instead they want to tap Trowbridge's phone to see for sure if he really is innocent in all of this. And of course, with the Scotland trip on the horizon and the meet schedule for Scottish First Minister Gemma Dowd, it seems as good a time as any to enact this plan. Up in Scotland, Dowd and Kate meet. The former recognises her from an earlier conference, and it remains to be seen if they'll be able to coexist here. Kate promises to bring the proposal surrounding price caps to the Prime Minister, allowing her to dance to their tune. Speaking of which, Trowbridge is not happy that Austin has come along to Scotland. Kate manages to calm him down though, stroking his ego and getting back in his good graces. Idra keeps an eye on Hal through all of this, who buys a phone and SIM card but also makes secret phone calls to someone. When he's called out for it, he owns up to the call and remains defiant that he's not about to betray their plan. However, he refuses to disclose who it was. So the plan goes ahead just after this, and Austin is led into a surveillance room. He's shocked, but he sits with his headphones on and listens in, while Roylin is left alone in the room, ready for the Prime Minister to greet him. Kate leads an unsuspecting Trowbridge to the meeting room, where Roylin immediately tells him to stop talking. She sits in front of him and brings up that she's behind the bombing. He's livid and immediately grabs around the neck. He chokes her out, but Austin and the others race in, just as Roylin falls back on her chair and blood starts oozing from her head, which is where episode 4 comes to a shocking conclusion. Episode 5 of The Diplomat Season 2 starts with confirmation that Roylin is not dead. She's still bleeding and being patched up though when she frustratingly asks Kate, "Now do you believe me?" before the latter walks away. The reality that Trowbridge almost killed Roylin is massive, but one thing's for certain now: he didn't set the bomb off on his warship. Kate, Trowbridge and Austin return to the party, where the issue of price caps is brought up by the Scottish. The thing is, Trowbridge is in no state for political swordplay and he falters. He tries to toast as well to brush it all off, but given he has blood on his sleeve, Kate urges him to stop. Idra, meanwhile, speaks to Roylin plainly. Now that they have information from her, they can't be responsible for what may happen next. It's a backhanded threat of sorts, and Roylin's fate now rests in Nicole Trowbridge's hands. As for the Prime Minister, fresh off the party debacle, he doesn't know who to trust in government. For now, Roylin will stay at the safe house. The Prime Minister is innocent, but Kate feels the heat, especially when he questions her loyalties. Given she left him alone with Roylin, Kate opens up and admits it wasn't the best move on her part. Kate puts her foot in it though when she points out Austin was listening from the other room, hence why he managed to get in there so quickly. Of course, the pieces slot into place, and the Prime Minister is shocked when he realises Kate orchestrated a plan to try and entrap him. Stuart wakes up Hal and Kate in the middle of the night, not in separate beds this time I may add, with big news. US Vice President Grace Penn is en route. Nobody knows why she's coming, but Kate scrambles back to London all the same, with barely enough time to get dressed properly. It may well be something to do with Idra. Idra earlier sent a report to the CIA headquarters, and whatever is in it has warranted Penn to fly out. Kate meets her and the pair talk. The context of the conversation begins with Kate trying to explain the events leading up to Roylin's confession with Trowbridge. We saw this mentioned in the first episode, but here the Vice President brings up the French's intelligence surrounding the murder plot involving Lenkov. The VP meets with Trowbridge inside Winfield, where Kate brings up to Stuart that the Prime Minister is actually innocent. He's pretty taken aback, while in the meeting room, which holds the Prime Minister, the Vice President, Austin and Kate, sees discussion take place over what actions they're going to take next here. Penn interrupts and explains that the Trowbridge/Roylin situation is not why she's here. She's actually arrived because the Russians were accused of a crime that the British themselves committed, souring relations between the countries. She can foresee that if this is made public, diplomacy with Russia is going to be tough to come by in the future, and advises them all that they should probably just keep quiet and sweep it under the rug. The alternative is a risky play to test loyalties within the government. It certainly gives a lot of food for thought, and Trowbridge agrees to think it over. As for Penn, she's not done throwing out her own truths just yet. She calls out Kate for her prospects as VP and gives some pointers about how she can better herself for the role moving forward. Kate actually comes away pretty impressed despite the scathing criticisms, and it shows a lot about her character that she can take these on the chin without becoming flustered or annoyed. In fact, Kate actually comes away thinking that Penn should keep her job as the Vice President. When she brings this up with Hal though, he disagrees and the pair butt heads. Again, Kate really doesn't want the job, and soon Penn learns as much too, as they sit and have a drink in the aftermath of her heated exchange with Hal. Penn admits that she's changed for the role, and the pair bond over politics and their vulnerabilities. Fresh off this meeting, and with tons of serotonin coursing through her veins, Kate speaks to Hal and suggests that he do what he can to keep Penn in office. However, Hal is still pushing to get Kate into the VP role and won't listen. When Kate grabs the phone to call Washington, he yanks the phone out of her hands and demands he listen to him. Grace shouldn't be rescued, Hal tells her, and as Kate instead brings up all the amazing things Great Penn has done in her role, she's in for a massive wake-up call. Hal stops all of this when he drops a bombshell reveal. It turns out the bombing wasn't Roylin's idea, it was Grace Penn's, and it shatters Kate's entire worldview. Episode 6 of The Diplomat Season 2 starts with Kate reeling after the bombshell reveal surrounding Penn being responsible for the HMS Courageous attack. Penn came up with this to halt the growing momentum surrounding Scotland leaving the UK, and in doing so, using a tragedy to unite the nation. While this worked a treat, the US told Britain to bomb itself, which obviously isn't good. And the cherry on top of this secretive cake? Much like Trowbridge, President Rayburn didn't have a clue. The next morning, Kate decides to forge ahead with gunning for the VP role. She makes the changes to her appearance as Penn suggested, changing her suit and tying back her hair. Penn soon notices this and invites Kate to have breakfast with her. There's a bit of initial hesitancy given what Kate now knows, but there's undeniable respect between the pair as well. Stuart continues to try and win over Idra, telling her he may follow her out to Washington. Idra is quick to point out that ship has sailed, or I guess blown and sunk depending on the level of irony in that statement, and she walks off when he pleads with her to reconsider. Meanwhile, Trowbridge calls in Austin Dennison to join him. He apologises for the recent hostility between them and believes they need to work together. Neither know about Penn's involvement in the bombing, and Dennison is brutally honest when the PM pushes him for his opinions. Austin wants him to resign and slip away, and Trowbridge seems to agree. Penn is still wrapped up in everything going on, and suspiciously so I may add. On a call with the president, Penn broaches the subject of Kate replacing her, but there's still a lot being kept under wraps here. It turns out Rayburn and Trowbridge wanted to appoint a nuclear czar to specialise in defensive strategy, and Trowbridge was quick to recommend Kate for this role. This obviously offsets Kate's idea for jumping into becoming VP, and Penn speaks to her about it afterwards, apologising that all of this was for nothing. Even worse, Austin wipes his hands of Kate too, admitting that them together was a mistake and deciding he's not going to be the go-to guy to get to the Prime Minister anymore. During the big scheduled dinner, Trowbridge delivers his speech but stops midway through, announcing Kate's new role. Penn immediately grows suspicious and believes this is her political manoeuvring. Hal soon clears that up, and outside, Grace, Penn and Kate talk. Penn brings up the current political climate, including how Russia is increasing its military presence and the US are scrambling to keep up. With Russia inching ever closer over the Arctic with their influences, all of the US's European-based military submarines are situated in Scotland's Cregan base. Now, if Scotland were to leave the UK, it would point a big bullseye on this base and it would be shut down. In doing so, it would lose the only line of nuclear defence between Russia and the eastern seaboard. Penn orchestrated this attack for the greater good, sacrificing dozens in the name of saving thousands. After this damning chat, Kate speaks to Hal outside and concedes that Grace Penn should stay in office. Hal disagrees and believes they should report Penn's actions to the Secretary of State. It's hard to know if he's doing this for her or because he's desperate to cling to power and get into the VP spot alongside her. Eventually though, Kate agrees that they should go to Gannon, but Hal should be the one to make the call given she needs to keep things clean. Kate is going for the VP role after all. So the plan is put into place after the pair kiss in bed that night. When they arrive at the embassy though, Hal doesn't phone Gannon. Instead he phones the president, and as he does, tensions are high between Kate and Grace Penn. Penn wants her to stop going for the job, and the nonchalant shrugs and dismissals aren't fooling anyone, especially Penn, who questions Kate's new hairstyle and attitude. Back at the embassy, Hal is frantic. He phones Kate and reveals some shocking news. It turns out the president is dead. With Rayburn gone, that means the political power rests in none other than Grace Penn's hands. She's going to be the new president. The ending to Diplomat Season 2 is anything but diplomatic. The reveal that Rayburn is dead and Penn is now the new president is sure to send shockwaves up the political spectrum both sides of the globe. It's still unclear who killed Rayburn, but if I was to put my money on it, I'd say Penn is behind this. We already know she's got her hands in every pot, and she's made it clear that she'll do anything to have power, regardless of who may be hurt in the process. Kate's transformation this season has been fascinating to watch, and now that she's cut ties with Austin, or well, he cut ties with her, let's be honest, and changed her appearance, it seems Season 3 is going to focus on this brewing Cold War between the two ladies. With Kate playing as VP to Penn, if they do go this route, it sets up a dynamic that's inevitably going to be very interesting and racked with tension. Everything is resting on a precarious knife edge. Thankfully, we already know Netflix have renewed this one, so there's no agonising wait to see if this story will remain unresolved or not, which I guess is at least one consolation here. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.